Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to cover data management plans. I'll explain what they are, why you might use one, and how you can go about creating a data management plan. A data management plan is your plan for collecting, storing, saving, and sharing your research data. It is also a document of that plan, something that you can follow and modify as the project changes so that everyone who is producing data on the project is on the same page and knows the established practices and expectations. If you're involved in grant activity, it is also often a required component of the proposal. In fact, data management plans are probably more specifically applicable to folks who are writing proposals for grants. But they're also appropriate for any and all research groups who want to have consistency in data creation and management. It may seem daunting to develop a plan, especially if it needs to follow a particular or specific format for grants. Fortunately, there are numerous tools and resources freely available to aid with the development of data management plans. For US-based grants, the most significant is probably DMP Tool. This is a free tool that guides you through a list of questions to develop a data management plan for a particular grant agency. After you have answered all questions, it prints out a PDF that you can add to the end of your grant proposal. Another tool is the Open Science Framework. Open Science Framework is a repository in and of itself in which researchers can submit relatively small data sets. It acts kind of like a GitHub repository for research data, and folks can take a data set, fork it into a different project, and then share it back through the Open Science Framework just the same as you did. As managing and sharing data is part of their mission, they also have a guide to help you develop a data management plan. There may be specific guidelines from funders and journals. Most funding agencies, at least those within the United States, are covered by the DMP tool. For researchers outside of the US or those who plan to apply to funders outside of the US, funder guides can help you develop that plan to the funder's specifications. In Europe, the Digital Curation Center has a thorough DMP checklist. Across all of these tools, the components of the plan are typically the same, even if the order of the components varies. Regardless of whether funders require specific formats or you're developing a plan for internal use, the actual formatting matters a little less than the necessary sections, which I'll cover more on the next slide. Typically, data management plans contain information on the types of data that you intend to produce. This can include the data samples, physical collections, software, curricular materials, and other materials that you'll produce over the course of your project. Plans also include data and metadata standards. These are the standards you're going to use to store your data, name your files, and any other associated metadata that you're creating. Additionally, plans will contain policies for access and sharing. So if you're restricting access, allowing access, or protecting certain information, you need to discuss that here. Then, whatever you plan to do with the data at the end of the project, whether you're sharing it or keeping the data private, you need to plan for that as well. Plans should also include a section on policies for reuse, redistribution, and whether you intend to allow derivatives. This is the list of policies you intend others outside of your research group to follow. This creates a clear and documented strategy for sharing that can help prevent any potential confusion among the research group. Finally, you should have plans for archival and preservation of your data. Though your project may end and you may not be producing data any longer, you still need to make sure that you can store and preserve the data appropriately. Frequently, if storage is of concern and you're producing a large data set that cannot go into an institutional repository or another repository, you'll need to write long-term storage of your data into your grant. If a grant stipulates that data must be stored indefinitely, you may need to work with the funder on understanding where it is that you can appropriately house the data indefinitely. Finally, you want to document everything in a README file. Document your file naming conventions. Document any sort of persistent identifiers that disambiguate and identify this data set from others. List any associated publications and associated data sets. Note the version of the data that is being used. Note where to find the data so that if someone finds the README but does not find your data immediately, they can find your data through that README. Note what folks need to access the data, including any software or hardware requirements. You might also note what you suspect the data can be used for. Data can and often does have broader implications than you necessarily intend or envision during the production. But that does not stop you from noting what you think that the data can be used for and helping other researchers understand that as well. Also note any known problems or inconsistencies as well as any limitations associated with the data, so that bad data does not perpetuate further bad research. Note your collection methods, units of measurement, and variable names so that you don't end up having a snafu like in the video that was embedded earlier in this lesson. Note any sort of data integrity checks that are running on it, like fixity reports. For those of you who are unfamiliar with fixity, it's a freeware that runs a check on data to ensure that a file is unchanged from what was previously checked. If a file gets corrupted in some way, you have a means of knowing. If the fixity report comes back as having an error, you can go to a backup and then re-upload contents. Fixity will not restore corrupted files, but if you include a fixity report with your metadata, researchers who intend to use the data have a means to verify that a file has been uncorrupted before they attempt to use it. Also note any sort of ethical or privacy restrictions. If there are concerns about how the data might be used or who might have access to it, that should be noted. This allows you to share the metadata without sharing the data itself. Researchers interested in using your data will then know that the data is restricted and they can know why it is that specific way. Also note licensing. Is it licensed under an attribution license? Is it licensed under a public domain license? Then also note how you intend the users of the data to cite it. This will link research stemming from your work back to the dataset and provide credit. Thank you for watching this video. Up next, I prepared an activity where you'll use the DMP tool to create a data management plan for a proposal that you're interested in.